Well, I'm just on my way to the rock, to the mark that I'm going to fish. Can't quite get out there now until the tide goes back a little bit more. But what I'm doing on my way out is actually collecting the bait at a location where there's plenty of limpets, as you can see there. And what I'm looking for is the decent sized ones. I'm not interested in taking the smaller ones. There's plenty of decent sized limpets here, so just take those and leave the small ones. Now, for those of you that have never collected limpets as bait before, all you need is a knife, and then just slide the knife under and turn them over like that. You can see there, part of the rock has come with it, how they cling to these rocks. But it's quite amazing actually how much they move when they're feeding on the rocks. Well, I've got a few decent sized limpets there, and that should keep me going for a bit. But what I'm going to do when I get out to the mark is find a small little shallow rock pool like that, and I'm actually going to put those in the rock pool, and that'll keep them nice and fresh. And the other thing I'll do is, if any I don't use, I'll basically just leave them in the rock pool, and they'll survive rather than waste them. But if I do run short, there's a few limpets on the rock that I'll be fishing off. So if I do run short, what I'll do, I'll just pick them as I need them. All right, so I'm at the mark, and what I'm going to do is pop the limpets. That is those that have not stuck to my bait box there. Pop those in the little rock pool. Obviously they're not going to go very far, so I know where they are. And that will keep them nice and fresh, keep them alive. Turn them up. Okay, they're going to cling. They'll cling to the rock again, but this doesn't matter. It's no problem. I'll just prise them off again. It's about 2.5 hours before low water, and the plan is to fish down to low water and then fish a bit of the flood tide. I'm limited at this particular mark. I can only get in onto it, depending on the tide, a couple of hours either side of a low water before I get cut off. But basically it's a typical Cornish rough ground wrasse mark in the fact that it is very, very rough ground. It's just a mix of big rocks, small rocks, kelp and weed. You can't see it now, but at low water you might be able to see the outline of some of the rocks. But basically what it is, you've got the big rocks that will rise up to the surface. Some of them exposed at low water, but some just stay just under the surface. They'll rise up, and then you'll get a drop off into a gully, although the gullies are not deep. We're not talking deep water here, not at low water. And then it will rise up to another rock that will sit just under the surface. In the gullies there are a few sandy patches that you can try to cast to if you can see them, but very difficult, so more chance that I am going to be fishing right in the rough ground. But great ground, but the only problem is potentially it's a tackle graveyard, particularly when you're fishing like I will be today, the bait right down into the rough ground. It's not so bad if you're lure fishing and working a lure through the rough ground, particularly if you're fishing weedless, but it is bait fishing on the bottom. It could be a lot of snags. So I've geared up for that. I've geared up so if I do lose tackle, which I will, I'll be lucky if I don't. It's not going to be costing me much money. It's going to be a really cheap, simple setup. But the great news about today is the conditions I've got. I've been waiting for conditions like this to go wrasse fishing when the tide is right, and the fact that I've got it fairly calm. There's a breeze, but basically it's calm. What I find is when it's a bit choppy and rough, it's not so good. The wrasse don't like it rough. They'll go out maybe deeper, or they'll just go to ground. They won't be so active. So really pleased that I've got some calm conditions today. Now the rig I'm using is very simple, very basic and very cheap to make up. Cheap because of the potential of the tackle losses. So there's no swivels, there's no lead links, no three-way swivels, nothing like that, just basic and simple. So at the top of the rig, what I've tied a loop knot. Then I've got my leader coming down and I've just tied the leader to the end of the loop knot. And for the snood, what I've done, I've tied a standoff loop and then I've just clipped one side of the standoff loop, so I've got a single snood rather than having the double snood of the loop. And then the hook is just a size 1, very sharp, very strong, short shank hook. And then coming down to the bottom of the rig, again, all I've done is tied a loop knot to be able to clip my weight on. Now for my rotten bottom, my weak link, and for those of you that are fairly new, don't know what I'm talking about when I say a weak link, when you're fishing rough ground, you fish a weak link, so the idea being if your weight gets snagged in the rough ground and you can't get it out, you pull it out and it's the weak link that breaks rather than your trace line or your main line. That breaks, and the idea being that you get your main line and you get your rig back. That's the theory of it. Now weak links are made of several things, but they're usually done as nylon. But what I've got is a paper clip. And I first came across this about 4 years ago when I met a chap called Brandon Jones down on Mevgasey Harbour Wall. And Brandon is well known as being the shore caught cod record holder. He was fishing there and fishing virtually off the harbour wall with a rig like this, fishing for wrasse. And I noticed this when we were talking about his setup. I said, that's a paper clip. And I'd never seen it before, but what a great idea is using a paper clip as your weak link. So the idea being, of course, if my weight gets snagged and I'm tugging it, the paper clip will open and fingers crossed I'll get the rig back. And so I've just looped the paper clip on down at the end of the rig. And for the weight, and again this is to keep costs down, instead of throwing out here expensive leads that I could lose several of if I have to buy them, I'm just using it. This is old school, it's nothing new. It's using an old spark plug as your weight. And all you do is close up the gap there, and I've just hooked the paper clip onto it. Use the spark plug, and again, it's not new. People use in these sort of marks that they use spark plugs. You can even use stones or anything but expensive leads. So that's the rig. Very simple, very cheap. The idea being that if I lose it, hopefully at worst I'll lose a spark plug, and I might lose a hook, but I'm not losing swivels and leads and lead links and things like that. Okay, on the reel I've got nylon. I'm using nylon today. No point using braid at a mark like this. Reason being, as I said, if I'm casting that bait over those rocks that rise up, my bait's sitting in the gully over a rock, I could have the braid running over the rock. I get a fish, I try to play it in, the braid might run over a rock, sharp rock, and then snap. Ouch. Very expensive, and I could lose yards of it. So braid for lure fishing at marks like this, yes, definitely, but not for this type of fishing bait on the bottom. So I've got 15-pound nylon. Might seem a bit heavy for some of you, for wrasse fishing, but you need that power. You need that power, that strength to be able to get those wrasse, if you're playing a decent wrasse, over those rocks, or if you get it snagged, to pull it out of the kelp. So 15-pound nylon, got a 20-pound clear amnesia leader. The rod is just a lure rod. It's a 20 to 60 gram, so reasonably powerful, and powerful enough to flick out the spark plug. This small spark plug, believe it or not, weighs 1.5 ounces, and other spark plugs I've got with me weigh 2 ounces. Okay, that's the rig. That's the rod, and the setup, very simple. Now what I'm going to do is, I'm going to hold the rod. I'm going to pop it in the tripod and I'm going to feel for those bites. And there's actually something pretty special about when you're bait fishing is holding a rod and feeling everything. And I love to do that if I go bass fishing on a surf beach, where shallow surf beach, where you're constantly having to move, either chase the tide down or it pushes you back to actually hold your rod. It's a lot easier than moving tripods. But yeah, it's just getting that direct contact when you feel that, or hopefully you feel that tap of the fish, or the pull of the fish through the rod and through your fingertips. It's a great feeling. Well, there you go. It shows you how snaggy it is here and shows you the paperclip system works. Unfortunately, that was my very first cast, and retrieved it in to check the bait and maybe cast somewhere else, and I got snagged first time and couldn't get it out. So there you go, the paper clip has opened, and so all I've lost is a spark plug instead of a leg. So it just goes to show that it works. It's just frustrating, but that's all part and parcel of fishing marks like this. You've got to expect this. But what I'll try and do next time is I must have cast that right into one of those rocks. I'll try and see if I can judge where the gullies are and get it into a gully where it's probably just kelp on the bottom, where I've got more chance of getting it back. What I'm doing here is making sure I change the bait regularly. Put some fresh bait on. Limpet, it doesn't have a huge amount of scent. Obviously it's got some scent, but it's not a huge amount of scent. So keep it changed regularly and keep a scent trail going. Well, what I'm doing here is often when you go wrasse fishing on rock marks like this, you can get the wrasse very, very close to you, sitting down at the edge of the rocks, just in the weed that clings to the rocks. I've often found that when lure fishing for them. Yeah, sure, you try casting out over the rocks and drawing it back, but it's always worth trying down alongside the rocks at your feet. In other words, a bit like harbour wall fishing, really. There we go. There we go. Just like that. Like harbour wall fishing. You get them down at your feet. I mean, obviously get them out over the rocks as well, but Always worth trying, right down at your feet. Whoops. Right, fantastic. I'll get this one unhooked, and then we'll have a look at it. Not a big wrasse, but at least we haven't blanked. So there's a tip for beginners. If you're rock fishing for wrasse, lure fishing or bait fishing, never ignore what's right down at your feet. They can often sit down there. Okay, it seems okay, and we'll get it back. Have a quick look at it and then get it back quickly. Lovely little wrasse. Yep, it's fine. Down it goes. Straight back down into the kelp. You can see what I'm talking about. You see all that kelp attached to the edge of the rock here. That's where they sit, hiding in there. And then you drop your bait or drop a lure just down there, and often you'll see them just suddenly appear, swim out from the kelp, and take it, as that one did. Right, I'm in again. And this is a much better one. Yep, this is a much better fish. Gotta keep it. That's where you need the. One of the problems with them, when you're playing them, you've got to keep them from. Yeah, this is a nice wrasse. Or well, certainly better than the first one. Up you come. Beauty. Get it in a rock pool. Well, it's unhooked itself, so it must have been only just lip hooked. Fantastic, beautiful wrasse. Well, I've lost, I think it's 4 spark plugs, but I've only lost one rig, which is great. Yep, and off it goes. Fantastic. Difficult fishing, you can see now, hopefully the camera will pick it up, what the sort of ground is like. That's basically what it's like. You've got those weed covered rocks and then little drop offs down into gullies where it's still rough but not as rough. And tackle graveyard, but I mean sure, given a choice, I normally come and lure fish it, where yeah, of course you still stand in this, fishing this sort of ground. You can still lose lures, of course. Easier if you're fishing weedless because you need to work the lures right down. You're not trying to avoid the rough ground. Get it down into the rough ground. But it's just a bit of fun, isn't it? You come out here, you got free bait, collect your own bait off the rocks, the limpets, natural food for them. Really, I suppose the old-fashioned way of fishing for wrasse, with bait, rotten bottoms, chuck it out into the rocks, into the gullies, and catch them that way. Now, limpets, you can see limpets work, but I wouldn't say it's the greatest wrasse bait when you're bait fishing. Probably something like crab, peeler crab, because of the scent. They'll take hardback crabs, of course, which of course they naturally feed on. And another fantastic bait for them is probably more productive is something like ragworm. But as long as with the limpets, you make sure you change the bait quite regularly to keep a bit of scent going, and then it definitely works. And as I said, it's free. Just help yourself to it off the rocks. Tip I can give you when it comes to fishing limpets is try and keep this gooey bit on, which is, I guess, is probably the stomach contents. Keep that on, because try and hook that on, because that contains probably the most scent. It won't stay on. It won't stay on for long. Hence the need to probably change your limpet bait. I would say probably every 10 minutes to keep it fresh. But yeah, that bit there, try and get that on the hook as well. Well, if I don't catch any more now, I'm not worried. I'm pleased. We'll try and catch another one. I've got about an hour to go of the session before I get in, but really pleased to catch that slightly bigger one. I'd have been a little bit disappointed if it had only been a small one, although it's always grateful to catch something. So good to catch a decent one, and it was caught. You can see this rough ground here. You can't see it, but beyond that, for another 10 yards, it's more of this rock and kelp. Just beyond that, it drops off into a gully, and I was just literally lobbing it out, just beyond, just like that, just beyond that really rough patch down into the gully, and the gully's not very wide. It's only probably about 10 yards wide, so it's hit and miss if you do drop it right into the rock and end up losing the spark plug or the rig. Well, I'm getting the tap there, but of course it could be a lot of very, very small wrasse just having a peck at it at the limpet. Oh no, we're in. Yeah, got it. Yeah, I've been getting a lot of small pecks for the whole session, but you just need that. That's a good one. It looks like they're coming on the feed now. Now the tide has started flooding in, and we're getting to the evening. Well, not a bad one. Fortunately, it's hooked okay. Right. Yep, that's recovering now. They're a delicate fish, wrasse. They're not as tough as you think. Well, a quick look at it and get it back. I think he's ready to go. Yep, it's gone. Fantastic. Yeah, they look like they're coming on the feed now. I'm getting little knocks almost as soon as the bait is hitting the water. It's just a shame that I've got to go soon, but a lot of fun. Well, that's it. Time for me to call it a day. 3 lucky limpets, 3 that I never got to use. So what I do, I've just moved them now, pop them in this slightly bigger rock pool, and they'll soon cling onto the rock and survive. And you never know, I'll come back another time, and at least I know where there might be 3 limpets. That's if the wrasse haven't had them. But yeah, that was a huge amount of fun. And look at that! What an absolutely fantastic evening. It's Saturday evening now, and what a fantastic way to spend a Saturday afternoon into the early evening. And even better when I get home. Got a couple of cold beers in the fridge. So once again, I hope you found that useful, and many thanks for watching.